Since childhood, my mom has always taught me that it's important to study well to get an education and a good job so I don't end up in her situation. She trusted my father, but he left her before I was even born. Because of the pregnancy, she couldn't finish her studies, and now she has to work as a cashier at a regular grocery store. As you can imagine, we don't have much money. I often see my mom upset, even though she tries not to show it. That's why from the first grade, I decided to study hard to get a good job in the future and help my mom. And I was doing well until a new girl joined our class in 7th grade. I remember with horror the moment when the teacher introduced our class to Danica. She looked unkempt and was quite large. Her voice surprised me. It was very rough, like a boy's. When the homeroom teacher was asking her questions, I realized she wasn't very smart. She spoke as if she came from a remote village. That day, I was sitting alone at a desk, with the one behind me being free. When the introduction was over, the teacher told her to choose a seat. She headed in my direction. I really didn't want her to sit next to me, and I hoped she would sit behind me. But unfortunately, she came straight to me. Before sitting down, she didn't even ask if the seat was taken, and I realized that this girl didn't know any manners. Almost immediately, I noticed an unpleasant smell of sweat. She reached out her hand to me and introduced herself. I had to respond in kind, and she immediately squeezed my hand tightly. It was very painful. I pulled away, and Danica started grinning evilly. "What a weak little hand you have, like a chicken's neck," she snickered. "It won't be easy for you to deal with me," the teacher scolded her and told her to pay attention. Danica turned away and began to pull out her notebooks. When the pain subsided, I realized that my hand was all wet with her sweat. I felt very grossed out, but I didn't want to wipe my hand with a tissue in front of her. That would be disrespectful. So I discreetly wiped my hand on my pants, deciding that I would throw them in the wash when I got home. The next school day arrived. I wanted to sit somewhere else, away from this Danica. But I felt awkward making a point to move away from the new girl, and I was also a bit scared of hurting her feelings, so I decided to give her another chance. When I walked into the class, I saw that the teacher wasn't there yet. That upset me. As I walked to my seat, I saw Danica. I wasn't happy to see her. The new girl immediately reached out to shake my hand again. When I shook it, I felt something sticky. Pulling my hand away, I saw that it was covered in chocolate. I got angry and sat down to grab a tissue, but then felt pain in my behind. I jumped up and instinctively touched my bottom. A few pins had been stuck into me. Through the pain, I pulled them out, and Danica was laughing at that moment. I was so furious that I started yelling at her in front of the entire class. At that moment, her face changed. It felt like she was about to hit me. Her glare scared me and I fell silent. We just stood there, staring at each other, and I began to tremble. Suddenly, Danica burst into laughter again. "Look how you messed yourself." "That's not true," I said. "Then why are there brown stains on your backside?" she mocked. I said it was chocolate, but my response only made her laugh harder. Soon the entire class was laughing. "You all say that," Danica said, laughing. As you can understand, that's when my peaceful life ended. After that day, Danica started ruining every school day for me, and this went on for over a month. It began to affect my grades badly. I couldn't concentrate on my studies. I was constantly thinking about what else this girl might do. The stress and anxiety made me feel horrible. Unable to take the pressure anymore, I decided to visit our school psychologist. To be honest, I had never seen any students go to him. Sometimes, passing by his office and peeking through the crack, I saw him sitting alone, working on paperwork. Approaching the psychologist's office, I realized it was very difficult for me to talk about the bullying I was experiencing, especially to a man. Just then, I spotted Danica far down the hallway. She's definitely looking for me to do something bad again, I thought. I quickly read the psychologist's name on the door plaque and dashed into the office. "Hello, Mr. Stevenson." He looked up at me, scared as I was, and greeted me, then invited me to sit in the chair. He quickly made me feel comfortable, and I decided to trust him. The psychologist patiently listened to my story, nodding his head occasionally. Mr. Stevenson leaned towards me with a smile and said, "You know, I'm the best school psychologist in the world. I promise we'll fix this." I looked at him, surprised. "Okay, but how?" "I have my ways," he said. "I'm a man of my word. I promise that within a month this girl will stop bothering you forever. But you must promise me that you won't tell anyone about our sessions." At that moment, I was so desperate that hearing these words, that this could end forever, I eagerly agreed. Mr. Stevenson looked at me. "I can see your state right now, and I'm not sure your answer is well thought out. Let's do this. Think it over again tonight at home, and if you're ready to follow all my instructions and keep everything a secret, we'll start our sessions tomorrow." I didn't want to argue, so I agreed and thanked Mr. Stevenson for the session. At home, I started thinking about today's conversation with the psychologist. Why all the secrecy? Why did he say I couldn't tell anyone about the sessions? The only thing I could think of was that he didn't want to reveal his methods. The next day, I couldn't wait to see Mr. Stevenson. On my way to school, Danica caught up with me. "Where did you disappear to yesterday?" she asked. I told her I went home. "And you didn't think to ask for my permission? Do you know how long I searched all over for you yesterday?" "Why did you do that?" I asked nervously. "Why, for this?" She kicked me immediately. "Ouch, that hurts." "It doesn't hurt, it's fun," Danica replied. Then came another kick. "Stop it," I said. Another kick followed. It was really painful, and I realized it wasn't going to stop. So I decided to run to school, but sometimes Danica caught up with me and delivered another kick. Thankfully, she calmed down once we got to school. My bruises hurt a lot, and instead of going to class, I ran to Mr. Stevenson's office. I entered, started crying, and told him again that I agreed. Then he walked to the windows and closed the blinds. The places where she had hit me hurt a lot. Quickly, and still emotional, I told him what had happened. He pulled out some ointment from the first aid kit, handed it to me, and asked me to apply it to the bruises. After listening to me attentively, Mr. Stevenson calmed me down and said this would all end soon, but he warned me that he would need my help. I asked, "What can I do?" "It may seem strange to you, but you must do this. You need to start following Danica after school. Don't ask why. You'll understand later." This request confused me. I expected anything, but not this. "Will you do this for me?" Mr. Stevenson asked. I replied that I would. All day, Danica tormented me, and after school, I desperately wanted to go home, crawl under the blanket, and forget all about this. But unfortunately, I had to follow this monster of a girl. Leaving school, I trailed behind her. On the way, she kept picking fights. The thought of her disgusted me. After 2 weeks of this, I started to feel overwhelmed. My studies had suffered badly because I had no time left for classwork. I began to doubt Mr. Stevenson. There was a feeling that he wasn't competent. Coming to his office, I decided to ask, "Why do I need to follow Danica?" Mr. Stevenson seemed a bit offended. "You don't trust me?" he asked. "If you have doubts about my methods, we can stop our work." I hadn't expected him to react that way. I didn't want to quit now, especially after so much effort. Plus, this was my last hope. I apologized, and we continued our work. One day, while following Danica, I was horrified. She was shooting pigeons with a slingshot. I really hoped she wouldn't hit any, but unfortunately, she managed to hit one. It fell, and she started giggling and rubbing her greasy hands. Then she ran up to the pigeon, began petting it, and calling it by my name. With one swift movement, she broke its neck, then started hunting for more pigeons. She hit another one and repeated the same thing. I was so terrified by this sight that I stumbled and stepped back, accidentally stepping on a stick. Under my weight, it snapped. Danica quickly turned in my direction. Seeing me, she lit up with joy. "Oh, it's you. "Let's play," she said, aiming her slingshot at me. I ran. A rock flew past me that she had fired. "If you tell anyone what you saw, you'll be next instead of the pigeon," she yelled after me. That evening I felt awful, especially remembering how she broke the necks of those poor birds. At that moment, I started to suspect something. Recently, a girl from a parallel class went missing at our school. Could Danica be involved? I saw her talking to that girl a couple of times. Thinking this over, I became even more afraid of her. The next day, I deliberately arrived at school late to avoid Danica. My first stop wasn't my class, but Mr. Stevenson's office. I told him about what I saw yesterday. Entering his office, I told him about what I saw yesterday, saying that I thought she was abnormal. As always, he listened to me attentively, then said, "You know that almost all serial killers usually start with killing animals?" I said nothing, but I was scared. "I have one last task for you," he continued. "In your next class, you need to insult this girl and tell her that you'll expose her secret to everyone. She'll get mad, but she won't do anything to you in class. Then you need to tell her you want to meet alone, whisper the location in her ear. Then excuse yourself to the restroom and come to me. She won't be allowed to follow you out of class. After that, I'll take you home and give you a note excusing your absence from the missed material. She won't bother you anymore. But remember, when you return to school, act like you don't know me, okay?" I was so scared, but Mr. Stevenson's confidence reassured me. I agreed. Surprisingly, the plan worked. I did everything exactly as Mr. Stevenson asked. I really hoped he would keep his promise, and Danica would stop acting like this. At home, I caught up on my favorite animal program on TV when suddenly it was interrupted by breaking news. This morning, we regret to report tragic news. Remains related to the missing child case were found in a trash bag on the side of the highway. The body is the remains of a child. The body was also beheaded and burned to ashes. Among the bones inside the bag, police found a student ID card from a middle school. On that charred card, I recognized the photo of the missing girl from the parallel class at our school. I was horrified by the news. I suspected that Danica had killed her. I saw her approach that girl a couple of times. And what else can you expect from this lunatic? Mr. Stevenson was right. Killers start with animals. Did she really move on to people? The week at home flew by quickly. The day came when I had to go back to school. Scared, I went to class, fearing to run into Danica. To my great relief, she wasn't in class. Soon, the missing girl returned to school. I saw her during recess and was so happy that she was alive. But she wouldn't tell anyone where she had been and how her documents ended up with someone else's remains. Now I'm left wondering, whose bones did the police find on the side of the highway? The answer comes on its own. Danica never returned to school. My grades improved again. Life returned to normal. Occasionally, I see Mr. Stevenson. A few times, he winked at me. I smiled back only once in acknowledgement, but after that I pretended not to know him, keeping our agreement. One time, he told me he was the best school psychologist in the world, and he was right.